found a place. It's like the store just continues. I hear footsteps.
Backrooms, rated R.
Should be heard.
I'm a Republican now, so I'm supposed to be racist.
I think all white people are racist anyway.
Oh!
You haven't aged a day. You've aged like a million days. That's this many, right?
Yeah, your fingers smell like genitals.
Okay.
Red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. You moved.
Ghostface eliminated.
He stabbed her. My pronouns are they, them. He stabbed them.
Scary Movie, June 5th.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Culturecast. I am your host, Chris Stachiw, the only host of this episode. And on this episode, if you clicked on it, per the title, you know we're going to be talking about, well, a horror movie and then a scary movie in that order. And yes, I guess technically they're both scary movies, but only one bills itself as such in the title. So let's talk a little bit first about Backrooms 2026. So as some of you who know me know, and those of you who just listen to the show know, I am not exactly in the demographic for this movie. I had no prior knowledge of the Backrooms franchise, meta, creepypasta ahead of time. I had heard about it with the liminal spaces, photos on the internet, but it was not something that I had kept up with. On my previous show, Scary Stories We Tell, we talked about Hi, I'm Mary Mary and the Walton Files and some similar kind of analog horror things. But broadly, we and I, people my age, I don't think liminal spaces is a horror concept that is made for people my age. I want to say it's more for Gen-Zers or younger than that, which is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that, obviously, at all. I am very amenable to going and watching a movie made for another group of people and kind of enjoying it through my own lens. And I think for someone like Kane Parsons to take an idea that effectively started as a well-done CGI YouTube series and turn it into a full-fledged film, not only directed by him, but written by Will Sudik, and produced by, James Wan, Sean Levy, Osgood Perkins. I mean, those names alone are pretty big. It's also it's an A24 film. So when you layer all of that on top of it, it just becomes a lot more of a thing than it, not to say it wasn't a thing on YouTube. Again, it's been able to escape the gravity of Planet YouTube and kind of wiggle its way into Planet mainstream, which is not a given. It's not even easy in a lot of cases. I mean, there have been plenty of things that have come out recently that have not had any sticking power the way something like a Backrooms has. I would equate Backrooms in a lot of ways to a Five Nights at Freddy's, where it's very well known and very well loved by the people who love it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's hyper mainstream. I mean, I think obviously similarly to Five Nights at Freddy's, Backrooms has become almost unavoidable at this point due to the yellow imagery with the wallpaper that they keep using in the liminal spaces. But all that to say, film was not made for someone my age. I would say for most people my age, this would have been I probably heard about it on YouTube. But again, I don't know how many people my age were searching out this kind of creepypasta meta horror that was being cooked up in, I would say, the mid-teens. And, that's, when YouTube kind of started coming into its own as a place to present a narrative story as opposed to just, funny reaction videos or, kind of non-narrative content. Something like a Backrooms, similar to Walton Files, similar to Hi, I'm Mary Mary, similar to, again, Five Nights at Freddy's, tells the lore without telling the lore. It shows the lore and expects that the audience is just going to follow along. That's why the audience is there. And for someone like myself, I appreciate that level of storytelling, but I can completely understand how someone else would be turned off by that in a way that is just completely, antithetical to the enjoyment of something. There's a lot of people, and I understand the sentiment that if I have to go read about something outside of it or do any sort of groundwork to enjoy something, you lose a lot of people. And I think that's unfortunate because there are a lot of really good things out there that are not necessarily super straightforward and don't just exist on the page. You have to go, or on the screen, you have to go and do a little bit more legwork. Midsummer, The Witch, Hereditary, a lot of Kubrick's films. I'm not going to say Chris Nolan's film because I think Chris Nolan makes highbrow films for morons. I don't want to be that guy, but I will be that guy because Tarantino and Nolan are two of the people that I just can't stand. And so I don't I don't look at their films as ones that engage with me outside of the theater or outside of the book or outside of the initial experience, because they want to just do all the legwork for you. And it's like, well, I don't really agree with or care with your interpretations of the Odyssey. I just don't. It doesn't excite me, doesn't interest me. I don't care if anyone has to sit in hour lines to buy tickets for a movie. It looks like it's trying too hard. It looks like the kind of movie that makes me, when I saw the preview for it, when I was seeing Scary Movie, it looks cringe. It makes me cringe. And I love every single actor in the movie, especially Robert Pattinson. And I just couldn't care less. I don't even care. And it's unfortunate because it's the kind of thing that should get people to engage with the source material outside of the film. And it won't, because they think that everything there has been presented in the most optimized format because Chris Nolan knows what he's doing. I would go as far as to say you don't need to know anything about Backrooms to appreciate the film directed by Kane Parsons, because I think Kane Parsons and Will Sudick do a good enough job, if not a great job, at taking what is the backstory and lore of the Backrooms kind of meta horror universe, distilling it down into something that's eminently approachable for people that have no experience with it, while also creating something that I think lives in and of itself within the Backrooms meta universe. It's not creating its own new world of the Backrooms. It's more or less just existing within the previously established lore, which I think is really smart because it makes your film almost undeniable in terms of the effect that it will have on the lore in the long term. They're not saying, well, this is its own new Backrooms thing. This is just part of the pre-existing Backrooms universe, which is very smart. You make your film undeniable within the framework of the lore and the fandom, because now this is part of it. This isn't redefining it. I think that was kind of my issue with Five Nights at Freddy's, is the Five Nights at Freddy's film, I can't get a sense of how is that tied into the original lore and mythology unless it's trying to do its own thing, which is kind of a bummer because the lore for Five Nights at Freddy's is already so rich and deep and kind of enthralling and engaging. And Scott Cawthon has done a good job at crafting that narrative. And I really was a little disappointed when I learned that the film was not going to just be an extension of the narrative. It was going to be a kind of a retelling of the narrative. And I just don't like that as much as just having this be part and parcel to something that already exists, that people already enjoy. Don't try to stand between the fans and the thing that they like. Stand across from the fans where they already want to be going to, and they're coming to you. And that's what the Backrooms film feels like, at least on the lore kind of front of. I will say I'm a huge fan of Chiwetel Ejiofor. I think Chiwetel Ejiofor is one of the best actors who was in an MCU movie and was not given anything to do. I mean, he's an amazing actor, but I mean, just to speak to the kind of mainstream appeal of him, it's unfortunate that he didn't get more time as a character that has seemingly been forgotten in the MCU. Mordo, which I guess was killed off in Doctor Strange 2, ? It's unfortunate because Chiwetel Ejiofor is great. I mean, I'm a huge fan of anything that I've seen him in. Obviously, for most people, it's going to go back to something like a Children of Men, or, you know, I guess for a lot of people, it's Children of Men. I mean, I don't really know a lot of his British work because I haven't seen a lot of his British work, but I've seen, again, he was in Serenity as the villain in Serenity. I think that's where a lot of other people would have seen him. But Children of Men, I think, is the first time a lot of people saw him in anything, and at least on this side of the pond. And I enjoyed him in that film. I enjoyed him in Serenity. A film I'm not even particularly a fan of. I just recently was talking about that with Mike White of the Projection Booth, how not a fan of that movie I personally am. And maybe I should go and revisit it because it's probably a film that at least deserves some revisiting. I'm never been of the mindset that they need to revisit Serenity or Firefly or any of that, but I know that there's still a huge amount of people out there still kind of yearning for that return to the Firefly universe. So me personally, I have no interest, but I know plenty of people that are very engaged with Firefly and Serenity. So, but back to the Backrooms of it all. So the film, if you haven't gone and seen it by now, or if you haven't seen it, is a kind of isolated retelling of the story of the Backrooms and how it's discovered by Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, a man who's going through a divorce from his wife, and he owns a discount furniture warehouse, which I'm assuming is meant to be in Wisconsin because that's where the Backrooms initially took place, was in a hobby town That's where the original pictures were taken, was in the back room of a hobby town in, say, somewhere in Wisconsin, may have even been Racine, Wisconsin. And so Clark owns this furniture store. He's a failed architect. And one day when he's in the basement of his store checking on a breaker box that doesn't seem to have any, at least 3 breakers on the box have no outlet to anywhere. They're not going to anything and coming from anything. Clark discovers that there may be something on the other side of the wall from him in his store, which he would have never seen. He sees the, line of light on the wall, and that's the dead giveaway. If you don't know what the Backrooms are, like I did going into it, the initial mystery of the film is very engaging. The initial mystery of the film is very kind of enthralling. It's definitely something that draws you in. It doesn't give you a whole lot. The film opens with a kind of, again, I'm assuming it's taking place maybe at the same time or close to the same time as the film. So in the 90s, the film opens with a shaky cam in the back rooms that takes place in the 90s. So I'm assuming the film is also set in the 90s. And it does a good job of capturing that era, that feel. There's a little bit of, at least in my case, a bit of nostalgia for it. It's very funny. People younger than me have nostalgia for a time that I grew up in that I'm not even sure I have nostalgia for. It's a weird kind of shared pop culture touchstone that we all have this kind of weird liminal space, but it has to take place in the 90s because it doesn't really work otherwise. And I appreciate that because the film feels like it was set in the 90s. They really lean into the 90s of it all. They make it feel very set in a time and of a place. I appreciate that. I really like that we have Chiwetel Ejiofor opposite the therapist played by Renate. She's his therapist, but also ends up being essentially the main character of the movie, because about halfway through the film, he disappears into the back rooms and she has to go look for him. And it's funny because the trailer kind of gives away that the film might pivot halfway through to another character. And I had heard that the film was going to be about him disappearing, but obviously when you have Chiwetel Ejiofor in your film, you kind of want him to be the main character. And I like that we get his story and Mary's story kind of intertwined. We get to see his trauma, her trauma, how her trauma and his trauma commingle and intermix. I will say, for as much as I enjoyed this movie, I think my first kind of knock, and maybe only knock, against the film really is I think it falls into the trend of horror as X equals Y. So in The Witch, it was, witch and being a witch and paganism effectively is standing in for feminism. And in It Follows, it's, I guess STDs is what, STI, STD, whatever you want to call them, as a monster. In The Babadook, it's like, being a parent or being a parent of a child, a special needs child, is the monster. Like familial issues are the monster. Like this has been a thing now, like over and over again. Midsummer, Hereditary. And you know what? Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, the wolf man, the toxic masculinity is the monster. Like, and there's nothing wrong with it per se. It's just, I wish they were a little less overt with how they're working out their issues on the screen while still being entertaining, because you can do both. It's very hard and rarely does it work super well. I mean, even with something like Midsummer, one of my favorite films, there is still a huge contingent of people who watch that film that think that film is like a woo girl film because she gets her revenge on a cheating boyfriend at the end. Actually, by the end of the movie, she's extremely isolated and has been taken in by a cult that's going to force her off of a cliff at the end of the movie, effectively, or at the end of her movie and the beginning of someone else's movie. And that's the part that's, again, it's sometimes subtlety is needed, and I think someone like Ari Aster or Robert Eggers are up to the task of being subtle. I don't think every director can do that. I will say Kane Parsons is probably leaning more towards Eggers and Aster than he is an Eli Roth type, or someone who's just, no subtlety whatsoever, about as subtle as being bashed over the head with a ball-peen hammer. And by ball-peen, I mean a mallet like Gallagher would use. Like, there's no subtlety with Eli Roth. Ari Aster and others, they utilize subtlety. They utilize a lot of visual imagery and visual cues that they don't sit and focus on. The camera doesn't focus on them. It doesn't linger on them. It just kind of, they exist within the space, and that's it. I appreciate that more than, beating me over the head with, don't you get it? Childhood trauma is the monster. And it's like, okay, I get it, Steven. Jesus Christ. Pennywise is everything and nothing at the same time. Like, all right, we get it, Steve. Fine. So on all accounts, in terms of how they utilize the back rooms and the creatures within and what does the back room mean, I think they leave enough on the table to go interesting places with it. I think based on the amount of money that the movie has made, it made 20 times the initial investment. It was a $10 million film. It made $200 million. I think based on the initial investment, they will be probably making some more of these movies. And I'm assuming the more that they make, the more that they will explain of the back rooms and the less ambiguity there will be with the world and lore that they've created. I think you run into some real bad problems doing that, ultimately, because for most people, myself included, ambiguity is actually a good thing. Ambiguity is actually healthy in a narrative because ambiguity brings you back for more. Ambiguity allows you to have some room for interpretation within the narrative. I'm not saying it needs to be, spontaneous in terms of like, well, I'm really going far afield. My extraneous interpretation of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, that it's actually about Negro League baseball. I'm not saying something to that kind of ridiculous extent, like directors and writers don't leave that much wiggle room, but a good director and screenwriter will leave enough ambiguity within the story so that you, as the viewer, can enjoy it through your own lens and not so strictly within their narrowly defined viewfinder. I mean, J.D. Salinger famously did not want Catcher in the Rye adapted into screen, either TV or film, because ultimately the moment that it's adapted into something by someone else, that kind of sets the tone for how it has to be interpreted by everybody else moving forward. You cast a character and you have that character, and then anytime anyone reads the book, they're going to imagine the character as played by the actor in the film, as opposed to the way that the author had it written. And, kill the author is a very important conversation in 2026. I mean, it's really hard in a day and age where some of the biggest franchises are no longer helmed by the people who made them. And in some cases, the people who made them are long gone. I mean, Star Wars, which was famously a George Lucas endeavor that he was directly involved with at every level, is no longer involving him at all, and he has nothing to do with it anymore. He just enjoys the bounty of money that he got from selling it to people that have taken it further. So there are arguments to be made for the source material, source material be damned, do what you want with it, but also allowing the people that have enjoyed it before to enjoy it now in another format, I think is important. And I think that with something like Backrooms, it really treads a very fine line between being something new that people that have seen the original source material and have inundated themselves with Backrooms lore and Backrooms video games and Backrooms this and Backrooms that are now able to go, I'm going to go to the theater and watch a Backrooms movie on the big screen, which must seem pretty crazy to anyone who watched Kane Parsons videos back in, the mid-teens when they were coming out, when that was becoming a popular thing. I mean, 2022 is when the original kind of Backrooms videos came out. But I mean, these kinds of creepy pasta things have been around for a while. Slender Man was a thing. I mean, the Slender Man murders was a thing that people ended up making a big deal out of. Because again, you have a internet thing driving people to do bad behavior. I mean, ultimately, it's really just, once again, mental health parading as something else is the real horror story of it all. It wasn't the guns, it was the mental health all along. No shit. And that for me, I think is probably the issue with something like Backrooms is when you take something and you're adapting something that's so beloved by a large group of people that don't really have a lot of representation right now because of their age, it's really weird to see things that they love on the big screen as someone who has no prior jumping in point, because I, for the first time, feel like, oh, am I missing something? Which is weird because for a lot of people like myself, someone who watches a lot of film, or the other people I work with, like Mike White or Father Malone, who watch a lot of film, normally we're not the ones feeling out of sorts with. And this is one of these times where I'm like, okay, I am stepping into the world of the Gen Z a little bit, and the Gen Z horror world, which I'm not super inundated with the way I am with kind of the elevated horror and the other things. Like there's a whole subworld of horror on YouTube that exists kind of outside of the mainstream. And, David F. Sandberg, the guy who directed Shazam 1 and 2, that's where he got his start, with directing short form horror on YouTube. And I applaud that Hollywood and the mainstream, quote unquote, are taking it upon themselves to really search out new places to find horror creators or just film creators in general. Obviously, horror is a very profitable thing in terms of low cost, high margin. People love to go watch a horror movie on a Friday night with their date. It's just one of those things. People like to laugh. People like to be scared. People like to see people get shot. People like to cry. Those are the emotions that filmmakers will mine if they're good at what they do. And horror is a very easy one. And this movie leans into horror, both the Gen Z of it all, but also it wears its kind of influences on its sleeve. Well, I don't think it's unobvious to those who have never seen the movie. I think anyone who's a horror fan has at least seen pictures of the dinner scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre or any of the subsequent redos of that scene in remakes and other material. We once again get a dinner scene from hell, as it were, with Chiwetel Ejiofor cutting up a person or a kind of representation of a person and beating him to himself. It's insane. It's unsettling and creepy. It's as unsettling and creepy as Texas Chainsaw is. Dinner scene is as off-putting and gross. And I think it's very funny that Gen Z horror, it's not about being scary so much as being unsettling and creepy and off-putting and kind of causing the hairs on the back of your neck to raise up. Maybe not because what you're looking at is just terrifying, but maybe it's just because you can't tell what it is you're looking at. What you're looking at is amorphous or you can't discern what it is because it's just, there's a face kind of peeking out from around a corner at the end of a hallway. It's that, for me, Gen Z horror is really understated in a really fun way. For as brazen and brash and overstated as David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy remake is, these kinds of Gen Z horror movies I resonate with way more because they're metered, they're slow, they take their time. It's very much psychological, leans into the psychological horror, doesn't beat you over the head with the psychological horror. And I really appreciate that about this movie particularly. I haven't gone and seen Obsession yet, but I think the thing for me that I would say is kind of a good primer for something like Back would be, and again, this is a controversial take, and I know that there are people out there that are going to scream at me the moment I say this, but they're wrong, is Skinamarink. It's a film that I think uses liminal space, uses creepy imagery, utilizes analog horror the way this film does. I mean, it commits to the gimmick in a way that this film never could commit to the gimmick on a big screen, at least not with a actor of Chiwetel Ejiofor's standing, or any of the actors in this film, really, including Mark Duplass, who's in here for 2 scenes. I enjoyed Skinamarink so much versus all the other films I've seen probably in the last 20 years in terms of horror, because it taps into something that is harder to do than making a successful horror movie. It created a world and a vibe and a place in a way that is hard to do organically. You have backlit CRT TVs, you have stairwells and staircases to nowhere, you have noises off in the distance that are very muffled, you have an eyesight and line of sight that's 1 or 2 feet off the ground, which helps, again, lean into the unsettling of it all, because in that one you're a child, and so you're kind of already unsettled in the analog space, but then you're also defenseless. In Backrooms, they lean into that. There's the defenseless unknown getting lost in the back rooms, and there's no Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb to get back out. That's how they kind of lean into the helpless horror of Backrooms, is getting lost in the backrooms. But I would say that that's maybe the one thing about it that they kind of don't make as scary by the end of the film, is having to see a Mark Duplass character and the Async Research Institute, which is part of the lore of Backrooms, showing all of that takes away some of the horror that, oh, well, there's another door that people are going in and out of at will. Like, yes, I understand it's part of the lore. I appreciate it, but that doesn't feel like something you'd need to reveal in this movie. Frankly, the cutaway to Mark Duplass and seeing, Clark's Ottoman Empire, which is a very funny name, Clark's discount Ottoman Empire on the TV and realizing that he's seen that monster in the Backrooms as well. It feels like it's from another film, and then his inclusion at the end of the film feels kind of unnecessary. I feel like there were better ways to do it, or other ways to get to that same point where Clark is gone, where she, the therapist, Mary, could also die, possibly. It's not made clear. It's left open to interpretation, which I think is very fun. I think there were ways to get to that point without having an outside character from a lore organization step in and kind of go, well, here I am with the lore hat. And I will honestly kind of rail against this on any recent horror film that I've seen, because another one that did it that really was kind of off-putting was Heretic. Also, Longlegs did it, where it's like the movie pauses. The entire momentum of the film is arrested, and we just go into exposition dump. And this movie kind of does it right at the end. It's like, well, here's what this is, and here's what we are. And it's like, you're sending people out the door on kind of a crappy note. You're sending them out on a low note, and you can send them out on a low note any day of the week. It's just, this is not the kind of low note you should send the audience out on, which is not to say a low note as much as just a, like, the wagon has pulled into the station. Like, it should be, with a film like this, like, it comes out of nowhere and that's the end. In this, it's like they kind of telegraph that it's the end of the movie. And I didn't need that as a viewer. I was enjoying mystery of the Backroom so much. And then they kind of robbed the movie of the mystery right at the end. And it's not a twist. Like, there's no twist to the ending, and I don't need a twist to the ending. The twist is the Backrooms are a physical representation of people's memories, but they're being degraded over time. And so the Backrooms aren't perfect. They're kind of a degraded memory in living form. And so that's why when Clark is in the Backrooms, he sees a giant pirate version of himself, because someone in his past, or even him, remembered or misremembered a giant version of himself based on the billboard or the kind of lights on the front of his business. And so there's a giant version of him stalking the back, eating and killing people for who knows what reason. Who knows why the things in the Backrooms are violent. That's more interesting to me of a concept to mine, which is, why are the things in there sentient and violent? I don't really care what the Backrooms are. It's kind of hinted at that it's a space within the space, and it's an MRI company that discovered it. So, again, maybe they'll lean more into that in the next movie. I just, personally, it's not something that interested me at any point in the movie. I was not like, well, I want to know what the Backrooms are. Once they start answering those questions, there are more questions that have to be answered. There are more things that have to be accounted for. There are more things that they have to go out of their way to explain. And for me, I don't think explaining everything all the time makes things better. I think, frankly, it ends up robbing things of their mystery and ends up making something less interesting in opposite of what their intention is. I would think that when you explain something, it's so that you can close some doors and open others. But when, for the most part, a filmmaker explains things, it just leaves doors open that should never have been open to begin with, often because they don't think things through completely in reverse, and some things just don't make sense. And I worry with something like Backrooms that the more that they reveal, the further into a corner they'll paint themselves, and they'll be kind of unable to give it a satisfying landing, conclusion, explanation, what have you, because we're getting more of these movies. Gen-Z horror with Obsession and Backrooms both coming out back-to-back weekends, making more money than The Mandalorian and Grogu did, with 1/10 of the budget or 1/16 of the budget, and made more money. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I think we're about to get a glut of Gen Z horror, and I don't think it's all going to be very good. I think it's all going to be kind of varying degrees of success. I'm sure we'll get some successes in there, because like anything else, broken clocks are right twice a day, and people shotgunning at a wall are bound to hit the target from time to time. But I don't think anyone is going to nail it as much as Backrooms did, or hit the high notes, because there are some high notes in the movie that I really enjoy. I really enjoy the initial, finding of the Backrooms, Chiwetel Ejiofor going in there and walking around. I like those VHS analog horror moments where we're seeing through the video camera. I think that's fun. I don't think it's overused. I think it's used just the right amount. I think it's scary enough. And I appreciate those moments where we are just seeing through the viewfinder. And I think it really works. It's maybe the best part of the movie in a way. I think that if those other outside of the viewfinder ideas could live up to the ones that they're utilizing inside of it, I think you have something really special, clearly, with Backrooms as a concept. You don't have to have the same characters. You can just have people going into the back rooms. I mean, Kane Parsons himself, technically, those videos were created as he is the one going into the back rooms, at least the character that he's pretending to be through utilizing the viewfinder, similarly to the footage we see in the film. So the footage in the film has kind of a real world inspiration, which is those initial Backrooms videos kind of being shot from found footage POV, which, I mean, again, I think it's smart that we have an intermingling of that, because I think if this was just a found footage movie, I don't know, maybe it would have worked better. Maybe you wouldn't feel the need to like hew so close to the narrative storytelling, like exposition dumping beats, because, you know, Blair Witch, the film really could have been like, and I think that this is maybe kind of the point to pivot to Scary Movie, is this could have been like a Blair Witch, where it is just a complete found footage movie, but it has that same feel, that same level of dread, that same level of you go through a wall in your house and you disappear. Oh God, what next? You know, that episode of the Treehouse of Horror where Homer goes behind the bookcase into the 3D world was also at the top of my mind. It's one of my favorite Treehouse of Horror segments, but also I remember it's very scary to just go behind a bookshelf in your house and disappear. That concept is terrifying, to go into an area where you can see the other people but they can't see you, or you go into a wall and then you lose how to get back, which is, I mean, legitimately terrifying. And I think they kind of, maybe in over-explaining, they kind of miss what makes it so scary. I mean, the initial video of Backrooms is Kane Parsons falling through the floor in a random spot in the concrete that they can't see. Like, that concept is pretty terrifying. The Backrooms and where they are, you know, whatever that is, you can kind of go in any number of directions to mine that. But the idea of wandering into an area by accident that you may not ever be able to come back from, of no fault of your own, is terrifying. And I think that leaning into that and really mining that, for me, I think is the smartest thing that they can continue to do. And I mean, the exposition in the movie, need it or not, I think they really could have created something found footage heavier. And I think it still would have really worked. More so than the film already did. I enjoyed it a fair amount. I would definitely suggest, when seeing it in the big screen is necessary. I don't think I gained anything from watching it in the theater other than no longer having a free ticket at Marcus Theaters that I had been given like over a decade ago. They never expired, those diamond passes. So thankfully, I didn't have to pay to go see the movie, but I don't know if you should either, because it was good, but I don't think seeing it on the big screen added anything other than saying I saw it on a big screen, which, for those of you that are going to see The Odyssey, okay. I mean, again, I think the democratization of being able to see content anywhere is much more important than having to see a movie on the big screen, because I don't gatekeep. There's nothing to gatekeep. So if you say to me it has to be watched on X, Y, or Z platform because the creator said it, I'm going to watch it in the other thing intentionally, because I really detest that sentiment. It's like, you know, I don't care how somebody watches it as long as they're enjoying it, or at least as long as they're resonating with it in some capacity, good or bad. So speaking of resonating with something good or bad, Scary Movie. Wow. 2026, huh? It's been a long time since I saw one of these kinds of movies in theaters. So the original film came out in July of 2000 when I was 10 years old. And they have come out subsequent when I was 11, 13, 16, 23, and now 36. I did not see Scary Movie 5. I couldn't tell you a single thing about it. I know that Charlie Sheen was on the poster, and that's about it. I've stayed away from these films since Scary Movie 3, because Scary Movie 3 was the last funny one, and I know some people will fight me on that. I think even the people who made this movie would agree that Scary Movie 3 is probably the last funny one if they were to be asked which one is funny outside of the ones that they made. Because that's kind of one of the things about this movie that they really lean into, is the Wayans uninvolvement after the second movie, which, you know, again, the producers of the original films and them didn't get along. The Wayans thought that they were the important part of the franchise. I'm not necessarily sure that they are, because for me, Anna Faris has always been Anna Faris and Regina Hall's chemistry together has always been very funny. The two of them have always been very funny together. Scary Movie 3, I think, is very funny because the two of them with Charlie Sheen and Simon Rex is very funny. The Wayans brothers in the first movie are fine, but Shorty is just a one-joke character. And honestly, same with Sean Wayans' character. Ray and Shorty are literally one-note characters. And I mean, sure, if you want to involve these 50-year-old men in this franchise, cool. I get what you're getting at with the Scream 5 of it all. And I do appreciate where this film goes by the end when there is the kind of twist ending reveal. And I'll talk about it kind of towards the end of this. But a bad comedy is, for me, one of the worst things to have to sit through, because a bad comedy is a film that does not succeed at being funny. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do when something is not funny other than sit there and feel uncomfortable that I'm not giving you what you want. And I'm not going to, because you're not earning want at all. And you're trying really hard. And the harder you try, the more you flail. And the flailing is what makes it worse. And there's moments in this film that are genuinely unfunny in a way that a big budget $30 million studio film, and by the way, what universe is putting Miramax at the beginning of a movie ever going to do anything other than give me a level of ick that I have to kind of wash out of my system for the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie? That name should carry no cachet anymore. There should be no benefit to putting Miramax on the front of anything. Genuinely. Like, put Happy Madison up there, for God's sakes. Like, put anything up there, but don't put Miramax. Just Jesus fucking Christ on a cross. Like, it's, to me, we've not really learned a goddamn thing in 10, 11, 12, 13 years since the Me Too movement. Like, at all. Like, I can't believe anyone, like, Miramax should hold no credibility for anyone. Should hold no water. It should be a name that we cast to the dustbin of history and forget about. I don't give a shit if the Weinstein brothers' parents were named Mira and Max. I don't give a shit. Harvey Weinstein's name has forever tainted all of it, and throw it all out in the dustbin. Fuck them. Fuck them and fuck Miramax. I can't believe that we're trading in Miramax still in 2026. So that was just beyond for me, having to sit through that at the beginning of the film. Outside of having to watch the Miramax, the updated Miramax title credit, Scary Movie 6 is a completely unneeded movie in 2026. I don't think anybody is going to sit here and say, well, the world was really clamoring for a return to parody horror. I wish I could say the movie was funnier than it is. There are some funny moments. I did laugh several times at some of the jokes, but overall, I think the movie validates its unexistence. Nothing about the movie when I was watching it caused me to say, well, man, these movies being back is going to really push horror to take a look at itself and not be so goofy, or this is going to cause elevated horror to, like, no, it didn't do any of that. Like, it honestly had an opportunity to really lean into the parody of it all, the meta parody. And I think the best parts of this movie are the leaning into the meta parody. And again, I think the ending is part and parcel with that. But the parts of this movie where it's just a return to the stupid, unneeded Family Guy-esque cutaway jokes, like a Jermaine Jackson parody trailer, like, that's not going to age well. The original Scary Movie, I think, has stood the test of time for the most part, because the movies that it's parodying are still part of the zeitgeist. I mean, it's kind of funny. Scream 7's released the same year as Scary Movie 6. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, these franchises are still going 20 plus years later, and they both have a sequel only one number off from one another coming out the same year. That's parody alone. That's ripe for parody. That concept of, like, times haven't changed that much, now have they? They don't even really lean into that as much as they should, as much as they could, as much as anyone who's looking to really make a horror movie that's adapting these kind of horror movies in this day and age would, because again, they even say it themselves. Elevated horror, the audience who's watching elevated horror wants something that's more than just surface level. And guess what? People that are watching comedies now, not maybe elevated, but these kinds of movies fell by the wayside for a reason, because the formula became tired. Epic movie, not another, what the hell, there's like two, Fast and Furious, there's a Fast and Furious one, Meet the Spartans, I'm sorry that I slept with your 40-year-old virgin daughter. I mean, all these, like, wild, absurd, Trevor Gumbel would love me bringing up the Friedberg and Seltzer of it all. Like, those guys and their movies are diminishing returns. After the first one, it was just essentially back to zero. There was not even like, oh, it's like to 75%. Now it's at 50 and 25. Like, no. We're just at zero. We went from 100 to zero. I love Naked Gun. I did an entire series with Mike White and Mark Begley all about Naked Gun that then became a Chevy Chase podcast. You can go listen to it on the Weirding Way Media Podcast Network. Those movies, after the first Naked Gun, it barely. The second and third Naked Gun are fine. I enjoy the second one for some of the long kind of the long burn jokes in the movie that they kind of really slow burn to get to. But the first one is a classic. Beyond that, the second and third one, take it or leave it. The new one, pretty funny. However, again, it's doing its own new thing. And so if it had just tried to be Naked Gun all over again, I don't think it would have been as successful. And I think that's what made that movie so funny last year and so successful, is that it actually understood that the times have indeed changed, and the movies that have come out since, like John Wick, like all these things that it was taking upon itself to parody, have actually pushed people who watch those movies to expect a little bit smarter of a take, a little bit more nuanced or refined or interesting of a take when it comes to parodying those movies. And Scary Movie, it hits those notes from time to time. It's a remake of Scary Movie. It's a parody of Scary Movie 5 direct. We have the Ghostface coming back to kill the legacy characters, and there are new characters involved. That's very smart. We have them hanging a lantern on the fact that most of the characters in this movie died in the first movie, and then they're just like, well, who cares? I love that. Like, I love the irreverence that they show towards their own franchise. I appreciate that. I find that very funny. However, there's no payoff. I mean, there kind of is with the twist ending, but they don't really do as much with it as you would hope that they would. I don't know why they don't do that, because Scream 5 did what they're doing better than they're doing it, and they have the opportunity to one-up Scream 5, and instead of one-upping Scream 5, they kind of just fart and piss and in their own, and kind of play in their own mess. Like, it's not as funny as Scream 5. Like, Scream 5 is actually funny in those moments where they're kind of poking fun at the franchise. This doesn't get it. This hits every other note, but it's not hitting the notes consistently in a way that you would really expect from a movie at this point. This kind of, like, this just, it feels almost like Morbius in a lot of ways. Like, Morbius felt like a superhero movie that was made with 2001 Spider-Man as made by Sam Raimi sensibility. This feels like a comedy made in the mid-2000s with Scary Movie 3 sensibilities, but sometimes, because they're making fun of stuff that elevated horror, it forces them to be a little bit more creative with their parody. Like, there's a parody of weapons in the movie that's kind of funny. There's a parody of the stuff that's kind of funny. There's a parody of, and again, like, the whole movie is a parody of Scream, so anytime they do kind of the Scream stuff, it doesn't really work anymore. Because they're doing all these other things, the Scream stuff, just kind of, the ghost face of it all feels really forced, and I wish that they had just kind of leaned more into the Scream 5 if they were going to do it. Like, don't try to incorporate other stuff. Just make it, like, really meta and silly and goofy, and have the characters really winking at the audience. Like, we know that you can do that now. Deadpool did it over and over and over again. Like, audiences are not stupid. And this movie acts like audiences. And, you know, I do find it very funny that Regina Hall plays Ma from the movie Ma, essentially. Like, that's her whole thing, and that's very understated. They don't beat you over the head with that one. That one's very funny. If you've seen that movie, which I guess some of the movies that they parody, I'm kind of surprised they parody, because I'm surprised that that's a movie that people are, like, resonating with that. I'm surprised that they don't talk about a haunted house at all at any point, unless I missed it, which ends up being the reason we have Michael Titus as the director of this film, because he worked with the Wayans Brother Entertainment organization in 2013, 2014, and probably 2016 as well with 50 Shades of Black. Like, those are parody movies that are, I would even go as far as to say, A Haunted House is cheaper than this movie and has made more money in terms of budget than this movie. Like, this movie is a $30 million movie. Why? For what? For whom do you need $30 million to make Scary Movie when A Haunted House came out on a $3.5 million budget? It's not on the screen. I don't know, unless they're just paying, you know, Carmen Electra and Tiana Taylor cameo, you know, SAG minimum $1 million a day. Like, I don't know why you'd be spending this much money on this kind of. And if you're gonna do something that was really effects necessary, sure, but it's just, this movie's budget's 3 times the budget of Why? That's kind of the thing that really bugs me about Scary Movie is I saw Scary Movie the weekend after I saw Backrooms, and I know they're going to try and parody Backrooms if they make another Scary Movie. They're going to parody Obsessions, and they're going to parody Backrooms. I wouldn't be surprised if Backrooms, and mark my words here, I wouldn't be surprised if Backrooms ends up being the framework of the parody for the next Scary Movie. For Scary Movie 7, maybe. I don't know if they're going to call it Scary Movie 7 or Scary Movie 2, because who knows? They might just do that, given that this is just Scary Movie. I mean, I get it. Scream, because of Scream. So it'll probably be Scary Movie 7. But I wouldn't be surprised if the framework for Scary Movie 7 is Backrooms, the way the framework for this movie was Scream 5, the way the framework for Scary Movie 3 was Signs. Like, I wouldn't be surprised because the Backrooms can be used for a lot of things. You can have people walking out of the Backrooms into other films, other kinds of wild, weird cameo things, if you wanted to get fun with it and interesting, but more than likely, it's just going to be lazy. And what I don't understand is the Wayans know how to be funny. The Wayans are not unfunny. Broadly, the Wayans are funny. I've seen interviews and podcast episodes with some of the Wayan brothers, and they all seem very smart. And they seem all very in tune with filmmaking and their place in the world of filmmaking and what they can do to be successful and how they've been successful. I just don't understand why that didn't translate here. The movie doesn't feel like it has teeth. It feels very much like it's unable to bite and have any sort of commentary or sharp edge, and it feels very toothless. And I don't, up until the ending, which I think is probably the funniest part of the entire movie, I just don't understand why the movie is so unoffensive. And I'm not saying the movie needs to offend me, but the movie needs to kind of push the line and be a little bit subversive. They showed a preview for the final Jackass movie before this film, and that looks more subversive than this movie. And that's a movie about a guy where they're going to re-show the footage of a guy going up and down in a porta potty and having shit thrown all over him. And that's from the 90s as well. There's a lot of stuff in Scary Movie 1 even that's subversive compared to where this film kind of gets to. And this film does a sort of Trump joke, and it does a sort of Chat GPT joke. More specifically, the Chat GPT joke that it makes, I think, will age very poorly, which is another thing that this movie does over and over, which is make it so that it exists in a time of a place, which, as we all know, is a great way to make sure your film feels super outdated, more or less the day after it comes out. Oh, it sounds like it was written by Chat GPT. Oh my God. Guys, of the times, as I sit and rolled my eyes in the theater, I thought about it for a second. I thought, oh, this is funny, but it's not funny. It's about as low hanging as the fruit can get. And I at this point want my comedies to do a little bit more than that, because even comedy action movies like a Deadpool did more than that. They didn't just go for the easy joke. And going for the easy joke, it's just, for me, it's just not engaging. It's not interesting anymore. And the easy joke is where they go to over and over again with this movie. And it smacks of Scary Movie, 4 and 5, which, I mean, I've seen, I don't like, but I've seen, I didn't, I guess I haven't, I've seen 4, maybe I've seen 5, but I know I've seen 4. And it smacks of those kinds of movies. It's lazy, it's uninteresting, it's just trying to be topical. I remember when Craig Bierko at the end of, what was that, Scary Movie 4, he's jumping on the couch recreating the scene with Oprah and Tom Cruise. That oh, how topical. If you watch Scary Movie 4 now, you won't get the reference. And that's not great. When we talked about Airplane many years ago, one of the jokes in the movie that doesn't land anymore is the joke about coffee. It's oh, that's not how he takes his coffee. It's who is this reference for? Oh, this was a reference for someone living at the time based on a ad that was on the TV about the way, someone is taking his coffee. The joke has, for the 1 or 2 people, percentage-wise, 1 or 2% of people watching that movie now that get that joke cool. But for most people who watch Airplane now, if anyone's watching Airplane now, that joke's going to go completely over their head. And it's 1 in the movie. It's still a classic because it doesn't go to that topicality well over and over again, including a fake parody trailer of the Michael Jackson movie in your movie is not topical. All it does is and that the Michael Jackson movie, I don't even think is zeitgeisty enough to matter. It's kind of already out of the conversation by the time this movie's come out. And they came out the same year. They come out within a month and a half of each other. And nobody's talking about the Michael Jackson movie anymore. So I think if someone watches this movie a year from now, they're going to be like, oh yeah, remember how a Michael Jackson movie came out? The topicality is going to torpedo this movie's longevity as anything other than, another scary movie. And that's about it. Like, there will be people that like it. There will probably be people that, grew up with Barbarian and Weapons and these other elevated horror movies that watch this movie and go, oh, well, this is really funny because it's, making fun of weapons, or it's making fun of the witch, or I guess not even really making fun of it. Like It Follows, or, Scream 5, the first Scream I ever saw as like a 12-year-old. Like, I can appreciate that. And again, it's the Backrooms of it. This is somewhat being made as a rebootquel, I believe is what the movie calls, as a rebootquel for Scary Movie as a franchise. I don't think we needed more Scary Movie type movie. This is like really low-hanging, lazy humor. And comedies now, if it's going to do something like this, you got to be smart about it, and you got to be a little bit more intentional with what you're doing. You got to really make sure that what you're doing has a unified purpose and idea. And they hit on it here. And so the end of the film, the reveal is, oh, well, the killer who is the obvious killer the whole movie, her boyfriend, the Jack Quaid stand-in, who is even named Jack in the movie, who's been essentially revealing himself to be the killer over and over again, him and the Micah Monroe character from Scream 5, they are the killers. And then it turns out, no, they're not the killers. So there's 4 killers: Shaq, Anthony Anderson, Sean Wayans, and Marlon Wayans. And that twist at the end of the movie is they kill the characters that they're handing the torch over to. They kill them and say, no one's ever taken over our franchise. And they leave them in a burning building at the end of the movie. Like at the end of Scream, Scream 7, beginning of Scream 7, when the house burns down, they leave the new characters in that house to die, which includes Regina Hall's kids and Anna Faris's kids, and technically Marlon Wayans' niece and nephew, to die because they're like, you know what, they're never taking over our franchise. That's funny commentary. That's funny meta commentary that the old actors can't give it up and let it go on to the new franchise characters. That's funny. That's smart humor. Lean more into that. Having Anthony Anderson come back was funny. Having Shaquille O'Neal in place of Kevin Hart, because Kevin Hart didn't come back, was funny. That's a callback to other Scary Movies. They did a callback to Scary Movie 2 with Chris Elliott as shorthand, which is meant to be a play on long legs. Like, that's funny. Those are funny because it's leaning into the mythology and lore that this franchise has already created and kind of is adhering to, while also doing something different and kind of being clever. And I feel like if they had not been so concerned with parroting the movies of the day and just trying to make a funny horror movie, that's probably the way to do these now. Stop trying to parody things directly and instead create a parody horror movie that parodies things less directly. Like, they didn't touch Midsommar. They didn't touch Hereditary. They didn't touch The Witch. They didn't touch a lot of things that are ripe for parody. And, maybe the world doesn't need Scary Movie 7. I guarantee you we're going to get it because that's the way of the world and that's the way things are. But for me, this movie doesn't justify its existence. The twist at the end is funny and fun, but it doesn't get the movie over the hump. Frankly, I found the twist of Scary Movie 6, that the franchise characters come back to reclaim the franchise, to not give it over to the new blood. I find that to be a funnier and more interesting twist and a more meta twist than what Scream 7 was trying to do with its meta commentary ? My God, Scream 7. Scream 7 was actually fun until the reveal at the end, and then it completely derails as a film. Scream 7 could actually learn from this movie as to how to do a double twist. And not really, because there's no twist with who the killers are in this movie. It's very obvious. If it's parodying Scream 5, it's going to be them. But then to have a double twist on top of it with Anthony Anderson, Shaq, and the Wayans brothers coming in and being the murderers, and technically Anna Faris and Regina Hall are murderers as well, is very smart, very funny, and I think it's a very well-earned twist and a meta twist that speaks to the nature of horror franchises and franchises in general, and this idea of passing the torch. Like, there's room for both. No one has to pass the torch to anybody. You know how we know? Because within a year, we're going to have seen Iron Man Tony Stark and Captain America, Chris Evans, come back. And they've passed the torch already, but they're coming back. So, like, passing the torch is a fallacy. Like, passing the torch is not something that needs to happen in film or otherwise. You and the other people either age or what have you that are not like you can coexist and commingle. And there doesn't have to be the old veteran and the young rookie. Like, they can exist simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. And this movie, I think, kind of says, no, the expectation is they have to. And I think that's funny to disassemble that expectation and do something. That's where this movie shines, is disassembling the expectation and putting it back together in the shape of a middle finger, as opposed to in the shape of, a square. And I would love to see a more nuanced take on Scary Movie moving forward. I know that's not the expectation with a movie like this, but here's to hoping. A girl can hope. So I would suggest Backrooms, yes. Scary Movie, wait for it on VOD or Amazon Prime Video or whenever it comes to streaming, more or less in the next month, because in this day and age, you can get everything more or less right after it comes out in theaters, at least within a couple weeks. So as for me, if you want to hear more of my takes without just me, head on over to weirdingwaymedia.com, where you can find this show and all the other shows I work on, including 80s TV Ladies, which I've been on a couple times, The Projection Booth, which I've been on a couple times, Midnight Viewing, which I used to co-host with Father Malone and Mike White. There's a lot of stuff. So you can find all those things and more over at weirdingwaymedia.com. Like, rate, and review this show on iTunes or Spotify. That's where it helps me out the most, helps the show out, helps the network out. And Patreon is also a place you can go if you want to for bonus episodes and bonus content and the end of the James Bond show, which is coming to a very quick conclusion here in the next 2 months. So go there, help us out. If you don't want to help us out financially, just rate and review the show wherever you get it. And make sure to come back for the next episode of the Culture Cast.